Great. Thanks for having me today.
Awesome. So I believe you're in your outside office today. So where are you calling from?
That's right. We moved to Asheville, North Carolina. I'm back on I-40. I grew up on I-40 in Amarillo, Texas. I went west on I-40 to California, and then I went east now for the other half of my life. So I'm back on I-40, Asheville, North Carolina. I didn't just plug Asheville so everyone can go to Austin where we were. Leave this place alone.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can edit that part out. No, I'm joking. So Brandon, we had the good fortune of connecting a few times now, but most recently, just the last couple of weeks, and had some really good conversations. And obviously, heard a lot of great things about you even before that. And you have a really cool history in this space. And now with the I-40 group, but let's maybe take a step back and give the audience a sense of kind of who you are, your story, and what brought you to where you are now with the I-40 group.
Yeah. So, well, like I said, I'm excited to be here right now. And it's been a kind of evolution. I think I want to say I think fintech is the only industry I've never worked in. So my dad grew up with bars and arcades. I think questionably one of the first arcades ever. So I grew up in Amarillo. But like I said, I went out west to school. I was at USC. And so my education is a film degree. So from there, it makes sense to go into the software industry when you have a film degree. So I worked for Oracle, I've worked for SAP, I've worked for some really big database companies. So, when I was at Oracle was when Mark Benioff and Larry Ellison were talking about starting Salesforce.com. That's where that was. And so you can imagine even the evolution of how far that was from then. And so, so over time, in and out of different industries, I just realized that instead of building other people's brands, which I love, I thought, I'd like to build my own brand and set up shop. But I really wanted to focus in restaurants because I just have that like bar owner in my blood, and so that was kind of the impetus for that. But I brought in my creative background, our data background, the software background. So that's, kind of how I-40 started, which is kind of funny how it started, but ultimately we are a brand loyalty marketing company at the heart. And kind of maybe even before a lot of companies started doing loyalty as a service. And so it was exciting. And we had we got some clients pretty early on, and they're like, what are you doing here? And I think it was just a lot of people didn't understand that world. And we had been doing that for a while then. So it was a natural fit. And I love this industry. And so that's kind of the short story of the I-40 group. It really about me. I just love to eat. I love people. I love restaurants, and I'm back on I-40. So I'd love to help small businesses grow. So.
Love it. No, and I, it's interesting because I think I can relate to, I wanted to be an actor growing up, right? So I had a big my parents were big movie buffs. I was watching all these crazy movies at a young age, and then, then doing sociology, political science in school, wanting to get into law, then deciding to change my mind, getting into the business world, then do my MBA. It's just funny how you end up here. But I think, the interesting thing is that I think in some way, shape, or form, we all have this tie to the hospitality space because we all go out to eat, right? Whether it's weekly, some people daily, whatever it is, or some tie to that, that industry. So there's always that kind of like maybe 1 degree of separation. Either you've worked in it, or people have worked in it, or you've been in those establishments where it's you can take all that stuff you've learned and take it back and help contribute in some way.
Yeah. It's definitely not for everybody. I mean, it's a lot different than other industries. And having been outside for so long in other industries, it's given me a perspective that I think it's challenging at times, because I think the restaurants, like you said, I was thinking today before we hopped on here, I was thinking, restaurant owners as a whole, it's kind of like the craziest one to do it. Like, who's the craziest one to try this? And then it's them, but now it's kind of like, who has to be the smartest one to do this? Because the games have changed, but the ones that are still in it, they were the early adopters of like being crazy enough to go first in the restaurant industry. It's been around forever, but I'm saying like what we know is the modern day restaurant experience. They're still trying to learn, or haven't learned and need to learn about how to be a smarter restaurant. And so it went from like a true service model to now this more of a, I'm not going to say a software company. I'm not giving the restaurant industry just that. But the fact that you do have to know that, I've had restaurant owners say, this is not what I signed up for. I mean, and so they're like, how do I do this? So it's not for everybody, but it is kind of a kindred spirit, because at the heart of everything, you still have to have your catchment ready to go to treat people kindly, good food, good service. I mean, even at the restaurant leadership conference, you had this, I think the COO now of Walk-Ons, which is the leader of table service, came from Cinnabon. And then you had the CEO of Perkins, and you have one talking about CDP and the need for data and smart segmentation. You had the CEO of Perkins saying they were getting 5-star reviews for helping people that are on their walkers get to their table. And I just felt like that right there is the industry. That's the industry we're in, and that's not for everybody.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, right? Because I think, it's almost become, I'm not going to generalize by any means, but for the most part, it's almost become table stakes to understand how the tech can help revolve the restaurant, because it's not, now the competition is much higher, right? Because the whole digital presence is there. You see these bigger chains expanding into places they never would have been before. So now the local mom and pop is now, getting competition versus with the big multinationals, right? So is that what you're talking about, where that, the craziness now to the smart is in the sense of that hospitality mindset, you have to blend that with a sense of technology and data and how do you do things more efficiently?
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, I think more people are hesitant to move forward and break out like that maybe had 3 that would go to 5 and 10 and move out. Now they're just trying to hold on for dear life with 3. They're not looking to expand, especially in the table side. The full different game than going out and starting a franchise that's selling boba or selling coffee or selling some of this kind of lightning in a bottle. You have your C-store presence now that, like I said, that leadership conference, I think the CEO of Crispy Crunchy Chicken said that Crispy Crunchy Chicken said they added 2,500 restaurants last year. I'm like, man, I just heard about you just now. And so I think on one level, it's changed so much. But I said, I think in general, there's just not, that's not what they signed up for. It's not really, they don't have the time to do it. They've got other issues. And so you do have a polarization. In fact, I talked to the moderator after that when I talked to you about with walk-ons and Perkins, and I said, I think you should break this thing up into 2 different segments for people with tableside or table service business and quick service. And because the worlds are so different now. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about is there is a dichotomy between people's reality. One person's so excited. The other person's like, why did I do this? And I think, and for whatever reason, the average size client that I work with, not the person, but the business is over 45 years old. So, what I'm saying? I have some that are almost 60, some that are 40. So the average nets out between 45 and 50 years old, the company. And so a lot's changed in 45 to 50 years. And so anyway, we could go on about that forever, but that's kind of what excites me, but also kind of scares me in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can imagine, I mean, even just going to NRA this year and, seeing more and more companies, especially, in my role, right? A lot of partnership business development. So I'm always keeping an eye on what's new and what's out there. And, there's so much new stuff popping in, which is great because, the barriers to entry now to create some cool tech is much lower than it ever was. But in the same vein, it can be overwhelming from, a restaurant operator's perspective, right? Like there's a new tech that does this and does this. And some people are like, I don't even know what this problem is you're solving, but you have tech for it now. It's like, there's so much stuff out there. It's like, how do you
that's a great point
through the noise, right? In some cases is tech just being created for the sake of tech, or is it actually solving a problem? Like that conversation is up there too. But what I want to shift to here is kind of your specialty. And you said something to me, I think on a call when we chatted last week or the week before, is, when you get a client at the table, you push them to, when they're talking about branding and marketing, you want to hear a bad idea. I think you mentioned that, you push them to give you a really bad idea. So talk about that, because I think that's a really cool concept that I haven't really heard before.
Yeah. Yeah. It came from a development meeting with a restaurant. And so I don't know, marketers were always trying to process everything, and then we end up running everything, right? There's funny YouTube videos about how marketers run everything, so. Yeah. But what I've noticed is especially because I come from a film background where it was always, what do you bring to the table and what's your idea? And, someone else has all the great ideas. And I just realized that some of the craziest ideas are the ones that actually become the great ideas. And so part of our process was figure out kind of the brand, it's like blocking and tackling some of the stuff that's just day in, day out. You can ask your servers, you can ask your operations manager, what's working. There's that quadrant. And then there's stuff that you do that's more of a promotional stuff that we're pretty sure that this promotion could work because we've done that too. And then you have some brand, well, I call it more like brand building activity in the same vein as your current brand. If you had a brand strategy, many don't, but a proper brand strategy, like this is how we do things, but we're going to build on it. So we're going to start growing that. And then there's this other category that I love is, I just call it the bad idea category. Is that's the one that I try to stack. All the other ones seem to be crowded because, you can go online, you can go back into the database, and you can kind of get an idea what's worked or what hadn't, or you can do some research with the staff, and and then or you can just get anyone else to kind of add to something or chat. Like, it's not that hard to figure that out. But the bad ideas, those are the ones that I feel like put people on the map. The ones that like, you did that? I mean, I think of one client right now that we work with where they had a pretty famous star. They're pretty conservative. Everything in them is conservative about how they move. Internally, they've been around for well over 40 years. And then next thing you know, there's a famous actor dancing on the bar, handing out drinks and ripping his shirt off at one point. I really thought the executives were just going to like turn the camera off. But they kind of went with it. And on paper, for them, it was a terrible idea. But for the numbers and for the attraction of new clients, it could have been the bad idea that literally broke out the brand into a new direction. And that's, to me, how do you get someone to fall in love with their first love? That's kind of what keeps me up at night, because I have so many brands that are old. And so, but that applies for everyone. And I think a lot of times we get attracted to the new people that come out and do something new and think, oh, they did it first. And then there's no more room at the end. We can't do anything else. But I just want to challenge all the older brands. Like, you have some stuff in there. You have some goodness. Just got to think some bad ideas, and they will turn. If you have people around you to develop it, it could turn into a great idea. You need to work on it, but don't be afraid of the bad ideas.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think of a lot of brands that have been around for a long time that have reshaped their image, right, to keep up with people change, and there's new target markets you're going after. I think, the one that comes to mind is like Old Spice, right? I know Old Spice. They have these like very like different ads, which are great. Right. But I always think about the whistle in my head. I can that and then you can think about the commercials, which are actually really good, but they're really out there. But probably back in the day, it was probably very different in terms of what they did. But yeah, I can definitely, now that I think about it, you can see that happen more often. And I think everything we see now has always been an iteration of what's done before, for the most part, right? No one's really reinventing the wheel. It's just different iterations of things that have been done in the past. Yeah,
like Uber picks up people legally. Whereas before, someone else drove you, you think they were kidnapping you or hitchhiking. But now, but it took someone thinking like, why don't we make picking up strangers really fun? Or that's the one that I always attract to the most. But you're absolutely right, and I do think that the amount of struggle that restaurant owners have, the lack of margin really at the core that they have in the product usually. That if it's a software company, it wouldn't matter. But if there's a margin, there's costs go up. And I hear a lot about this from owners that are actually on the board of NRA. And when you're under stress, it's hard to think of great ideas. And so it seems like, well, we got the best ideas. And I think how are you different? Well, we care. We have best ideas. And you're like, oh man, but there actually are people that have better ideas. But I think the best idea for me is when you're not afraid of who has the idea. So sometimes when we work with people, we'll go through some of our exercises just to understand them, to get them out of a place of fear and be open to even trying, not to mention the kind of stuff that you guys do where you can start to segment the data and know which segment would be more open to this. And if you don't have segmentation, then that's a huge threat, right? If you don't have any idea who's out there that might be receptive to a new idea that you could test, that's a problem. So that would go back into another conversation with you about how you guys mitigate that with your software. But as it is, I think people are just so stressed that they don't want to have, they don't have any great ideas. And then at one point, there's people that get involved that they feel like it's a threat to throw out an idea, or like for us, we love when it's not our idea. We love when it's not our idea. We love just stimulating the conversation because we want them to buy into it, to try it. And so, there's many examples of that, but I would say that's one of the things that we prioritize with what we do is we're not trying to did I lose you for a second?
Yeah, just a second there. You're good. Yeah.
We're trying to stimulate activity to get the best idea on the table. Like Ray Dalio, he doesn't care how long you've been there. He just wants the best idea. That's his, and that's kind of what I would encourage people to continue to do is just test and try ideas, and don't be afraid to be like not the one who comes up with it. Like it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter who comes up. What matters is the success. And blessing the customers, blessing your customer, and letting them know how important you are, and engaging them.
Yeah, and I think too that to that point, it's one thing to have the idea, but to execute on it is the even more important part, right? And I think that's where you help a lot of your clients, is that actual execution of taking that kind of those word clouds and whatever, and turning that into something, and then showing there's an ROI from it.
Right. And I think that's a great. I don't know where you were headed, but that's a great segue into I'm especially come from the software industry, and we are a HubSpot Platinum partner at one point with another agency that I helped start and kind of help grow. And I feel, man, there's just not enough measurement in this industry. And sometimes the measurement resides, if it does reside, it's in the office of the CFO. So it's more of a risk averse measurement versus like this measurement should tell us what our next idea is. And I don't see much. I'm sure it's up there. I've got friends at Taco Bell and whatever. I'm sure it's all over the place up there, but the data has to tell you where to go. And if you don't have any measurement, I mean, even when we build a website, we want to measure their data first, what you did for sales first before we start creating, because how are we supposed to know what to build? And I think even brand people, the framer built my new website. Well, I don't think the framer should decorate my house. But that's ultimately what happens when you have a guy taking control of the data and saying, I wanted you to help me grow my sales. No, they were just supposed to build a frame. And I feel like that's where there's still education to have for what the MarTech conversion that we see in other industries. That MarTech conversion is kind of my drum I'll beat, is you got to measure stuff that you've done, and then make sure that everything in your site, everything in your ecosystem of your brand assets that can all be tracked. And then you use that data to make decisions that are smarter, that when you do a bad idea, you can quickly measure it to see a terrible idea. But that's kind of, I hope that probably resonates with what, Incentivio is about too. Like that's the game.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, we want to just take the guessing work out of it, right? Because to your point, the margins are too thin. You can't really go out and experiment stuff when your margins are thin. So you can to an extent, but for the most part, the core of your foundation, you want to have that based on data, because then the data can inform you on what to double down on. Yeah. And then that gives you the leeway to then experiment some other stuff and do some cool stuff there. But I think that's really, I actually just did an episode with Sash, just a few days ago. And what he talked about is, really the goal of our platform is to give restaurant operators the data to run a more efficient business. Because I think, it was a very uneven playing field, and it still is in a lot of ways, because you have, obviously the Starbucks of the world, the McDonald's of the world that have, millions and thousands of people behind, millions of dollars and thousands of people behind all these things and continually doing it. Okay, well, it's not fair that, hey, I know this great shawarma spot down the street, why can't they be able to market the same way? Because it's completely blind for them. So I think it's really being able to unify it. And I think data is the big unifier, it's the big equalizer in terms of like the level playing field. Because then but then to your point, you can put a bunch of tech in place, but then the tech's only going to do so much, right? Like it's on you to take that data. The tech can show you kind of where to go with it. Then it's on you to execute that piece of it. So that's where we're able to help a lot of our customers. But I'd love to chat with you about that same piece, right? This talk about data and how important it is. I'm sure that's exactly what you're working with some of your customers. How much of it for them is an education piece? How much of it for them is a little bit maybe risk aversion, where they're like, hey, we're hearing about the stuff about AI and ML, but we don't know. Like, it seems it's too cutting edge. Like, I'd love to hear kind of what you're seeing from your customers.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I mean, it seems like a normal If we like I said, we turn the script to another industry and you said that, they would think you were back 20 years ago. You're like, what are you talking about? Of course it's data. I mean, we got to realize the I've done the overall restaurant business. And so you have, on one hand, you have a legacy of people, the product is food. So that's interesting. I mean, that's just an interesting concept. This is food's an interesting product versus sunglasses or t-shirts. There's only so much R&D you can do with food. So we try the LTOs, but you're just kind of risking that. But at the end of the day, that's kind of the root of the historic restaurant business. And then we need a logo, we need a cool business, and we need something that people resonate with. Well, over time, what's happened is now the marketers historically in the restaurant industry have been almost food and beverage mixed with a brand person. Like, I like the logo. I want to work with that person because and I see that. I've seen that less now, but more, still some now, that in absence of data, in absence of knowing how to do that, you're like, well, let's just change the logo. Well, that's very expensive for a customer. That's something you would never hear me say. Right. I never come in, we got to change logo. But a lot of those folks are still in their industry leading, where they're having to learn what you just said. That then on top of that, they've got to sell to someone else. Now that I even have data, do I have the people around me to even teach me how to do that? A lot of my clients, I'm actually just kind of there with them and supporting them along. But I still don't have the keys to the kingdom because there's other people beyond that still are getting used to it on the CFO side or on the ownership side. That when you see the data, you have to believe the data, because your habits and the fear would be, we just need better food, we need better service. But I really think that I'm proposing that we need more data platforms out there for the smaller companies, for one. And I think that we're getting there. The two is you have to read it and it tells a story, and then you got to believe it. And then you can figure out what team you need. I think people aren't even at that, what team should you use to execute it? I still think we're picking through the data, different locations, non-integrated systems. Then, oh my gosh, I'm not used to looking at these. What does this say to me? And then I haven't met one company under 30 locations that even had an analyst. I mean, think about that. And if the ones that do have ones, they're actually sit their analysts usually on the cost side.
Right.
Like, I love what software companies like you do. And because I know you're just pumping out information. And I just think that what I like to do is not just figure out what that says now, but what has that been before, and start measuring moving forward. And that's not everybody knows. It's just, I think there's not enough Jedis in that world yet in this industry because it doesn't pay right. And so you got to figure out how to do that for less. And that's a hard challenge for a restaurant, is finding someone who knows data and then not whapping them with a huge bill. So, yeah. I mean, let's just get honest. And so you're relying on guys like your company, like, can you read the data for us? And can you make big business decisions for you? Like, dude, we're a software company. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, there's a lot to work out there. I'm excited, but there's still a lot to work out in that category.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, we're seeing so many different, I mean, I even think back about a year ago, ChatGPT, I bring it up in casual conversations and people are like, oh, I've heard it. Some people hadn't even heard about it. Maybe like 18 months ago. Now it's like everywhere, right? Like ChatGPT is like a household name. So we're seeing how quickly the evolution of technology advances at such a rapid rate now. We're like, it's hard to even say what 6 to 12 months look like from now because of the advancements just from the last 6 to 12 months. And now we're seeing more kiosks, we're seeing robotics in restaurants, we're seeing AI ordering, AI answering, and drive-throughs, like all these different applications of tech, and then which essentially gives people the data. But it's like, what are you going to do with that data? Right. Just good. I think the winners are going to be the ones that can understand. To your point, like the food has to obviously be good, like that's the core of it. But, I've always said that brand can sometimes take you much further than your product can. Like you can have a great product, but if you don't brand it right, you'll get stuck at a certain point. You can have an extremely crappy product, but an unbelievable brand, and that'll get you really far. And we've seen that in, I'm not even talking about just hospitality tech, but in other places, right, where you've seen that happen all the time. But it's interesting to see kind of like what that's going to look like over the next, year or so, not even just industry, but just even in our personal lives.
Yeah, and I think that's where I think on paper, people put brand into a logo. They put brand into maybe how you talk and your tone. And I get all that. For me, the brand starts with the leadership of the company and kind of the loyalty within the attitude within the company, the experience people have, because they're still having an experience. And so with that's another huge part of the brand. Loyalty is a huge part of your brand. Like that's kind of where we camp out. But obviously, we talked about earlier about data. I think even like I was talking to Yelp today, and I talked to a lot of people, and they say, I hate Yelp. It's just this feeling, like this emotional, I hate Yelp. And I'm watching a client of mine, 10X right now, with some stuff we're doing with Yelp. And it is part of their brand. Their pictures on there are their brand. How they talk on there. All these platforms are out there for people. And it's just, I think that emotionally, I think the restaurant industry is an emotional creature. And I think emotional creatures don't look at data the same way as I do when I do any sales, I do some sales training for staffs. I have some training in that in the background outside this industry, but from a persona perspective or from a disc profile perspective or whatever that tool you're using to get the fearful person naturally won't get into the data. And so I think part of it is like, I just don't like Yelp is not an excuse. Apple likes Yelp. They have a partnership with, when you go, Siri, what's the best loyalty company in the world?
Yeah.
What's the best restaurant? Incentivio. What's the best restaurant? Siri says,
right,
through Yelp. So we can't deny that. So I think that's where, if we just take all those things off, title off, fear off, and just look at the facts is the 35 to 45-year-old generation that everyone wants to come into their location right now that uses Yelp. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. So that's kind of where I feel like brand has gone for me, is all those platforms now part of the ecosystem of your brand. And me, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but the database is getting old and stale. That is not a loyalty strategy that we possess, but I see that happening in a lot of companies where they've just been feeding the same people for so long, and we've got to break them out. And the only way to do that is have some bad ideas, get out there, understand the data, and then work with some of those partners that fit into your brand. What I think is one of the biggest opportunities is, and this, I think we talked about this last time, is one of the industries, we know this, is it's a goodable industry, a good old girl industry. Like we kind of have this, I work with them, you work with them thing.
Yeah.
I've kind of changed my belief about that recently, because I just think that the restaurant industry only has so many customers to work with that can make good money. They're like an angel investor. And so come out of the gate, you swing hard, you get a lot of clients, everyone works with you. And then you kind of you bump into the ceiling because you can't keep growing the way you did. And then someone comes up behind you. Yeah. Like that's where I see like Incentivios, you're kind of coming up behind the punches, the Patronics, and they're fighting it out here. And here comes you guys. And I'm thinking, I ran track at USC. I like second place. I like third place because I can see what people do and I can make the adjustments on what they didn't do, and I can start my initiative with them. And so what I the challenge then for software companies is getting that other investment to be able to make those integrations, the changes you need to make internally, and realize you're going to have to keep up. And that is very hard for a company that's already has so much code written to go back to investors, to go back to their team and say, scrap everything.
And we do it all over again.
We've seen that with NCR. NCR is trying to reinvent themselves. Nothing against them. I love their story, but they're in the middle of that process of reinventing themselves. And that's not a very popular message to the street if you're public. So that's a whole nother conversation. But when I look at the brand now, I have to look at the technology. And that's kind of where I spend a lot of our time now, is analyzing what you have. Around, you there? Oh, yeah. What cameras do I have around your ecosystem that need to be talking, where I can get as much data about the brand you have currently and see how we can move with that? But I get excited about these up and coming software companies in this industry. And I'm encouraging restaurants, don't be afraid to work with them because your buddy hasn't. Because at one point they probably will, so don't be afraid of it.
It's interesting you say that. I mean, we see a lot of that too, where it's like sometimes the first time folks are hearing about us and it's like, hey, we've heard about these guys, so we'll go with them. Then they eventually come back to us. And, it's sometimes you need that external validation, which we get. But it's interesting you talk about that sense of like being bleeding edge versus cutting edge versus like a second, third mover. Because we see a lot of that, with our customers too, right? Where, they want to take on this cool project, but because of the margins the way they are, sometimes they're, even this whole concept of AI and ML, and, now it's starting to trickle down. But like, we saw some of the bigger companies start with that, right? It typically starts with the big companies that can afford to play around with this stuff, then it trickles its way down. I think, but it's funny because in on the tech side, it's a little bit different, right? Because the smaller companies are the ones that can do the bleeding edge stuff because they're so niche and focused. And the bigger ones, it's like almost the opposite in tech versus on the restaurant side, it's the big going the way down. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I mean, we see that stuff happen all the time. What I want to switch the topic to here is you brought up the concept of loyalty a few times. So I want to kind of talk about that piece. And, before we dive into the concept of what you're seeing when it comes to loyalty is first, I want to get your sense of what loyalty means to you.
Okay, great. Any other tack on to that sentence, or is that the question? Okay.
Leaving it open-ended.
At the end of the day, loyalty to me is just the bottom of a funnel. It's just a VIP brand advocate. But along the way, and you can look at the data. I mean, loyalty to me starts with the executives and them buying into the loyalty of their team and even understanding the concept of partnerships and advocates. And I think because I tell you right now, if executives don't buy into loyalty, then they just lose. They just loses money and they never do anything with it and it doesn't grow. Whereas other clients I've worked with, they bought into it top bottom. Everyone's bought in, like a Panera. Welcome to Panera. Mm-hmm. Like loyalty, like that's probably our number one competitor for ourselves, meaning our company, is the like getting the buy-in from the executives to do the strategy of loyalty correctly to make money. And so loyalty to me is the way you treat your customers, the way you treat your staff, the ultimately the way you nurture someone down into making this brand advocate. But again, for me, it starts with the loyalty that servers would feel working with an owner, or to me, it's just it's not a loyalty program is what I'm saying. It's a heart of, we're processing how we make a perfect client.
Right.
And it starts with how our executives make perfect employees.
So let me ask you there. So why do you think there is that hesitation, reservation, whatever it is against that, right? Like some companies have the full buy-in, others don't. What do you think causes the companies that don't have the buy-in? Why is that?
I do some fractional CMO work and some consultings for executives. So it's one of those things I don't like answering when I'm being recorded. Some people on a technical level, from a CFO perspective, loyalty will lose money if you just give away 10% every 10th visit. That's the old hot dog stand. I mean, yeah, you may get some brand awareness by having that card in their wallet, but to drive net new business, we talked about it this whole time, the right team, the right ideas, the right data, the right execution, all that baked together equals how you run a loyalty. That's why we started I-40 Group. And then you get it. Loyalty is easy. Let's do it. And you go, I've done some customer satisfaction surveys when I was at NCR, because I used to work for NCR. It's the cheapest thing to sell people. That's the first thing they get rid of, because they say, I just don't have the team to do this. They find out later. It just takes more than, one of my friends who works at Taco Bell, I don't want to say there's 20 people in the loyalty department. I'm crazy. It's crazy how many people.
That's wild.
Yeah, wild. They've doubled down. But think about that, going from my food's great, I don't need to do that. And so you're thinking I don't give away food, but I think that making that shift to it's all about customer data and customer experience, and you're just measuring that. And I think that's why someone wouldn't do it, is they either aren't the kind of person that does loyalty in general. They're just they just don't have that word in their vocabulary. Loyalty, I just want result. I'm not really about the journey. I just want it now. To being like, I don't have the time or effort to do this right, and I feel it, and I got to turn it off. You've probably seen both of those before.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, and I appreciate your context here. It's really good. And of course, I don't want you to give away all the big secrets, but, I think a lot of folks will look at a loyalty program as just a discounting mechanism, right? Which is the last thing it is. It doesn't have to be that at all. No. I look at, again, that's a nice byproduct of it. Sure. But I would say, honestly, I look at how I use loyalty in my life, right? Like, hotels is a big one. I travel a lot. Airlines is another big one. Hotel, especially, because just that feeling of, I think I say this on every show, but every Marriott property I walk into and I check in, they say right away, "Hey, Mr. Kumar, we appreciate your loyalty." Just that alone, right? It's just, again, and I think it goes back to what you said. It goes back to exactly what you said about loyalty is the personalized experience you bring in this whole world of tech that we have, and all this stuff and apps and this and that and data. All that stuff is great. It's the personal experience you can bring to someone to create a memory and an experience that makes them want to come back. And I think that sometimes is just as easy as, again, top down, right? It has to come from top down, but your frontline staff saying, "Hey, Brandon, thanks for coming in again. You're a loyalty member. Or did we noticed you like this last." Just small little things you can do. Or even at the end of a transaction, "Hey, I noticed you're not a loyalty member. You should definitely sign up because we have a lot of cool things," whatever it is, right? Like, just those small little human interactions, I think, is what loyalty can help bring. And not to mention, I mean, the data out of it is just beneficial for both sides, right? Because, as a customer now, I can get points. It can give me access to whatever. But as a restaurant, you now get access to so much customer data, buying data, trends, patterns that you just wouldn't have before.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, everyone's so addicted to, I can't wait to get 100,000 followers on Instagram or whatever. But why aren't we addicted to saying, I can't wait to get to 100,000 followers of my own brand in my loyalty system? And I think you'd think that would be like a no brainer. I didn't tell you this when I told you about how we started it, because this is like the proper loyalty, like I-40 group. Because again, loyalty to me is a conversation. It's a gigantic relationship, right? And it starts all the way through your company. But I waited it was a franchise that sold candy, like basically nostalgic candy. And I won't tell you who it is because there's different one of them, but anyway. So I walked in there and I said, "Hey," this is because I live in the area, I was with my daughter. "Hey, you guys looking for some more traffic?" Which is, I guess, if you ever ask someone a leading question, it'd be like that. Just, "Hey, do you want some more customers?" Yeah. So we started talking. So I did our analysis. I walked them through our brand discovery process, which is unique to what we do. And it's really fun. And there's tiers. There's always like 90% chance there's tiers, and people are getting in touch with what they started, and now they're not doing what they thought they were going to do, and things changed. And how do I get out of it? My marriage stinks, and I'm stressed. Like, you know what I'm saying? All the thoughts we get from a real human. And so, and now, in analyzing this, I just looked at the entire company. They had gelato, and I said, "There's no way in Southern California you're selling candy every day, but that gelato, I'm telling you, is where it's at." And so, no, the cogs on the gelato are too bad. It's just basically a push. I said, "Yeah, but I hear date night. I hear date night. I hear after school, and it's good gelato." So they're like, "Okay." And I said, "How many people do you have in your database, in your personalized social media company, your own database?" 100. 100. Well, that's going to be hard to push that gelato to 100 people. So I said, here's what I'm going to do. And I didn't know what I was doing then, but this is seriously how I think. I said, "I want to take all your kids, they're kids, pierce tattoos and bolts, whatever. I want to take all these, probably 16, 18-year-olds and put them through my professional sales training class for 2 days." She's like, "Okay." So I literally took with the back of the candy store, and we all sat down there, and I took them through my, I've worked for Oracle, SAP. I've had a lot of other training outside of that. And we put them through a professional sales training class. And then we turned them loose. And I said, "Every person who walks up here, I want you to say this. I want you to sell them this concept, and it happens. So and again, whether it's a Boeing 747 or it's a burger, it's the same sales process. It's just compressed. And so I taught them a compressed sales process, like I'm Canadian now, process. So they did it. And within about 8 or 9 months, we had 15,000 people in the database. That business grew almost, I'd say it didn't double, but it definitely 80% growth within that next year. They recovered the brand. They got out of the situation. It actually helped their marriage. So anyway, so I called them back later and I said, when I say marriage, I mean, the stress of all that working together as a family business was solved. And I think they ended up getting bought. It was kind of cool. And honestly, I feel like we did the right thing by helping focus on the thing that needed, because for some reason, no one was asking for no data. And we were hand typing all the data.
Wow.
We probably fat fingered and miswrote 20% of the information.
Yeah.
And to me goes, this is what I want to do. And so obviously it's scaled in advertising, it's scaled into measurement, all this stuff. But that core thing is still live today, is welcome to Hilton, welcome to Panera, welcome to wherever. And you'd be surprised of how people push back on me until Applebee's does it or someone big. Well, they do. But you got to get there. Otherwise, I just tell people don't do it, because it really will change your business, or it will make you completely crazy. The loyalty game. And I'm sure I probably don't like to hear that, but that's the reality. I tell people, do it right or don't do it. Do it with the right company or don't do it. Do it for integration or don't do it, because it will work, but you just got to do it right.
Yeah, there's no half-assing it either. But you can't be 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
They'll know it. Customers will feel that.
100%. Yeah. They can tell it's just it's just there for the sake of being there.
right. And but you and I, like what we're doing right now, this time of us together is just an avenue of having a conversation. And that loyalty, if that one thing people would see their databases, that's an avenue to now have a direct conversation.
Right.
You don't have to give anything away. You just have to love them and add value. I mean, we're doing blogs now for restaurants that never even knew what a blog was. How do you write a blog for a restaurant?
Yeah.
There's so much goodness in there with these older brands. They've been around, but you got to have someone to talk to. And so anyway, enough about that. I don't want to preach at anyone, but
no, I think that was a great story, because I think it just goes to show, I think, two things. One is, a lot of folks just don't know the power of data, right? And sometimes how easy it can be to capture it. It's like right under your nose. But two, then it's like, what do you do with that data, right? And I think that's the exciting part. For a lot of these businesses, and when I talk about, I think about a lot of the, the folks that are trying to franchise out and trying to grow, but even just the mom and pop just down the street. I mean, I know a couple of great places here where I always say, like, listen, if they had a way to market out, and I've gone and talked to them, but like if they had a way to market out, like, they could scale and do some crazy stuff. And but to your point, they almost make it just so overwhelming for themselves, because they make it a guessing game. But that's where I think tech doesn't necessarily have to scare you away. It can be, if you learn about it and embrace it. I think it's the embracing of it, where you see the folks that embrace it do it really well. I'm not saying everyone does extremely well because they use it, but for the most part, but the other folks that kind of like are waiting, you sometimes can wait too long and you lose a lot of your core customers, because it's really tough to get that customer back sometime after it's been too long.
Yeah. Well, that's you nailed it, and that's a whole nother. We could do another podcast just on that one thing you just said there about that what the data says about that, because that's an interesting some data around adoption and engagement, right? And their loyalty business, and what should you expect? What are the benchmarks we should expect? And when do we know we're failing? And where do we focus our efforts? And where do we spend our money? That's a huge conversation. I think for us, where we come back to is, actually what we moved to is, because I sold POS systems, I've sold software in this industry, I've sold loyalty, I've worked for NCR. Yeah. I have so much. I mean, I skipped over a lot. Remember, I worked in every industry. I've also worked for every company. But one of the things is what I'm so excited about is kind of our free data audit, our measurement audit. Is we know how to get in the databases. We know the POS systems. We know the API stuff that we have to pull in. We can do a free audit and even see what data do you already have. Where we want to go with this. So when we get to the loyalty setup, it is your website becomes this amazing asset versus this business card. And that's, you'd think we are so much further than that, and we aren't. And I'm so excited about that, is we can actually like do it for free. We're going to give you a measurement data audit. And I just, once people see that data, they're like, oh. And I think, to me, I think that's for smaller companies like sub 15 around there. They, most people wouldn't do it. We'll do it because we'll take that risk, because I think those are great businesses.
Yes. Yeah.
And a lot of times they'll try new things, because like one client I know, she's the most amazing thinker, and she'll like, I'll try it. I'll jump off the hideout first, and not afraid. And I love that about this stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway.
And I think they're also that, that 10 to 15 location spot is that really good inflection point, right? When we see a lot of brands, they're like, hey, you know what? We're kind of good where we are, we'll stay. Or we're like, hey, you know what? We want to take this thing to the next level and scale us out to 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 locations, whatever that is. It's a really good sweet spot there.
Well, you guys see a lot of that. I mean, you're in the middle of all of those conversations, because you get to see so many different sized businesses being in your industry. And one of my old clients became a friend of mine, actually works with you guys. That's how I originally knew about you. And he was so jazzed. And I could tell that he's a thinker. He's a go-getter. So I could tell he's like, these people are flexible, and they're looking for opportunities, and they're not afraid of feedback, and, they want to grow. And so you're getting to see other brands signal and say, I want to grow with you guys. And that must be an exciting thing to see out there. I don't see Absolutely. As much as someone like you would, because I don't have that amount of people coming off 40 group, but no,
I think that's I think what makes us all rewarding ultimately. The reason why we're all here, and I hope this is the same across the industry, but we want to help these restaurants, right? We want to give them the tools to, again, run an efficient business and run a business that can scale, but whatever their desires are. If they want to keep it as it is, if they want to just scale to one location and to grow to multiplication, whatever that looks like for them, we want to be there for them. But ultimately, it's like, hey, we have the mechanism, and this is what you're providing too. It's like, hey, the mechanism is there to, number one, get that initial baseline of data, but two, understand how do you grow this database, and then three, what do you do with this data, and then how do you really personalize that interaction with your guests, whether it's through digital, whether it's in store, whatever that looks like. So I think that's really where, I'm seeing some brands now do more of that as I go in, and it's great to see. And to your point, it's never too late, right? Even if you're a brand that's been around for a very long time, or whatever the case is, you can always change that around. And never say never.
You can totally change it around. And as long as one of the advantage that I've done, I got my background. I went back to get my master's in counseling. I have all these other more esoteric tools to be able to sit down and understand people's resistance internally. That's the biggest thing that we would do in those situations where it's not too late. It's also not too late to help unstuck people that don't believe it's possible, because we get a lot of that resistance with older companies. They've done something so long, they've literally, it's like they're getting married again, and they got to redo their whole thing. Yeah. And we're not afraid of that conversation. So if people aren't afraid of changing at that level, at the belief level, at the mindset level, yeah, you're right. Anything can change. Any business can break out.
Yeah. And the sky's the limit with the data. So I think,
100%.
So Brandon, coming up at time here, I want to thank you again for, I feel like we can go for another 2 hours and talk about a lot of cool stuff, which we can do in our time, maybe over a drink at some point. But I really appreciate you jumping on. I just want to kind of recap some of the really cool stuff you brought up, on the show. Actually, before we get into that, let's do a quick lightning round. Is how I love to kind of finish up all
Surprise me. I don't know what kind of lightning we got here, but Nashville.
It's nothing too crazy. Let's start with this. So what's your current favorite, if you drink, what's your current favorite cocktail of choice?
I don't drink. Well, right now I'll say Bloody Marys.
Okay. And if it's not a cocktail, like what's your go-to? Like, are you like a Scotch guy, a rummer guy, or like just guy?
I'm from Amarillo, Texas. So, for me to break into the IPA world's been cool. So I'm actually fond of some Sierra Nevada beers that have come out here that I think they kind of have that coffee profile, and I've enjoyed those. So that's very probably cool. Right now.
Nice. Lunch party or dinner party?
Lunch.
Why?
There's mimosas. So I guess it's another favorite drink.
Good answer.
There's something about the menus out there right now with brunch, and it is one of the top Yelp searches out there. Many people are putting these brunch menus right now, and I love trying some of these things that are unique. So I'll go with lunch.
Love it. If you were to start a restaurant, what would be the cuisine And what would be the name?
Oh man, no. No, man, I can't tell you the reality. I can't tell you the truth because I might want to do it. It might not be an if.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't want you to jinx it then. Give me an.
Yeah, I don't want to tell you, but I would probably say at this point, I mean, I'm a coffee guy. I'm a coffee guy. I like, there's a place here called Madness, got sushi and burgers. And so I think that kind of weird, crazy fusion, it would be something like that.
Cool.
Like it would just freak people out. Like right. they're going crazy and people just can't figure out sushi and burgers.
Yeah.
That would be kind of where I would go.
Very cool. So you're a coffee guy. How do you take your coffee?
But just straight up, just like, I like just the essences of coffee.
Do you have like a crazy setup at home for your coffee?
Yeah, we do. I mean, my wife likes all the sweet stuff and she does the milk and whatever, but I more do pour overs, and we have a lot of cool local roasters here in Asheville, North Carolina. And so there's one particular that I love. And I got kind of addicted to that one coffee there at Dynamite. Nice. So I'll have to send you some down here. It's good coffee.
I'd love to. I'm a big. I mean, I was just in Italy for a few weeks and just having the short drip espressos there. You know, it's just good.
It's right up the middle for me.
The good stuff. Final question is, what's your favorite restaurant right now in Asheville that you want to shout out, and your favorite dish at that restaurant?
Actually, probably I'm trying to think. There's a couple but my favorite restaurant right now is Andaz. It's an old classic Indian restaurant downtown in the Biltmore Village. We were looking for some good, some masala. We've been all over, and I love what he's doing. They even have the buffet. That's a good deal, but it's just it's so authentic, and it's called Andaz. I'll give a shout out to Andaz.
Love it. Yeah. And I'm a big fan of Indian food, obviously, being my background. So I love to hear it.
I mean, I'm just kind of learning some of the details, but I'll say, some of the folks that I know that are Indian have vetted it out for me. They're like, dude, that's real deal.
There you go. So you got the Indian stamp.
Yeah, you got the Indian stamp. Nice. So anyway, that's the one I'll shout out.
Love it. Thank you, Brandon. So again, appreciate you jumping on. I kind of want to recap some of the amazing things you brought up during the episode. You obviously have a very cool, diverse background, coming from film and then working in big tech and data, then bringing that over to restaurants. And you talk about branding. It's not just switching up a logo and switching up colors. I mean, it's one thing to look good, but you have to perform well. As the execution is just as important as the actual image, sometimes even more important. You talk about the service model of how restaurateurs came into this now versus more of a data approach they have to have. It's a good mix of both. I love the whole bad idea category, and people are sometimes too worried about throwing out bad ideas, or worried that their idea is going to get stolen, or it's not going to be their idea, which doesn't really matter. It's the execution of it, but usually it's those bad ideas that end up being the best ones. There's a lack of measurement in this industry. You talk about that, and data is so important. It's the big equalizer, and before you do anything, measuring your baseline of data is what's going to help you propel you so much further than just starting it blindly. And, of course, the piece about the loyalty, really how I encompass what you were saying was that, it's just a vehicle to provide more personalization and more humanization to your customers. And again, it's another avenue to generate more data, which, again, is the most important piece. So thank you for sharing all those amazing things. Before we wrap up here, any last thoughts? And also, how can folks get a hold of you if they want to chat and if they want to get in touch with you at the I40 Group?
Yeah. So, my email is brandon@i40group.com. I mean, Brandon, I tell people I'm Brandon. It's become a goofy thing, but Brandon@i40group.com. And they can check out our website and leave some information there for us. But I would just say you have a lot of data, more than you probably know, to measure. Get it measured and get an effective digital presence on all touch points. As unintegrated as they may seem, it can be pulled together. There's ways to pull the data together, but you just got to find the right people. So that's what I always say is just don't be afraid to get in there and make that a priority.
Yeah.
Is get that measured data. And then, work with a great team and integrate as well as you can. There's some systems that just, they're getting there and some are already there, but everyone's got a buddy. Everyone's going to tell them to work with someone. Just, I like to help people to say, hey, here's my experience, and give people that feedback. So I think having someone like that in your corner to lead you to that technology maze, that's always good to have. So yes, but don't be afraid of it. Just don't be afraid to talk to some of these smaller companies. They're amazing. And I think I do it myself. I always schedule meetings with these new upcoming companies because I just want to see what's going on. Yeah. It sharpens the saw, and it helps you understand where things are going to make better decisions. So you got to get that measured data. It's all in your POS. You got to get it out. You got to look at it.
Yep. It's your data. You got to be able to use it. So
it's your data.
Yeah. It's your data. Great parting words, Brandon. Thank you again so much for joining. This has been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure we're going to have plenty more conversations. Just so hearing you speak about this stuff, pick your brain, I think is going to be super valuable. So that brings us to the end of another episode of Data Delicacies. Again, I'm your host, Arun. This is powered by Incentivio, the unified platform for guest engagement. If you want to get on the show, please reach out to me directly at arun@incentivio.com, or find us on LinkedIn or on our website and reach out. More than happy to have more guests. Or if you just want to chat all things industry and tech, always happy to do that. I'm sure Brandon is as well. Brandon, thank you again. We're going to sign off. Have a good one.
Bye, all.